It's time for the 17th film in my 31 Horrors of Mike. Now, this is a film that I talked about long ago in a galaxy far, far away. That doesn't make any sense, Mike. Stop talking nonsense. It was a film I did talk about before. I actually did a little movie review of it years ago on another channel, and the film I want to talk about is Forbidden Planet. It's one of my favourite films of all time. It was made in 1956. It was directed by Fred M. Wilcox, and it's a film which I believe has stood the test of time more than most films from that era. Now, it is a sort of science fiction movie, but there are definite horror moments, and there's definitely a rather creepy atmosphere in the film as well. It's set in the 23rd century, and it's about a starship commanded by Leslie Nielsen. Yes, I know, you think Leslie Nielsen, you think Police Squad, Naked Gun, Airplane, all that sort of comedy. Love all that sort of stuff, but Leslie Nielsen was a leading man at this time, and so he's playing it straight here. And he's a commander of this starship, and the starship has been sent to this star system where a group of humans were supposed to have settled there 20 years previous, and they've been sent there to check up on them because they've not heard anything from them, to see what happened to them. So when they get into orbit of the planet where the original expedition went to, they receive a message from Dr. Morbius, played by Walter Pidgeon, on the ground, who claims that there was a horrible catastrophe and that everybody on the planet was wiped out, and that if they valued their lives, they needed to leave orbit immediately and never return. So Leslie Nielsen being Leslie Nielsen, the commander decides, no, to hell with this, we're going down. So they land on the planet and they go to investigate, and they find that there are only two survivors from the expedition, Dr. Morbius and his lovely daughter Altera. So they start to ask questions. They ask Dr. Morbius, well, what happened to everybody? And he says that there's some unknown force, probably some unknown intelligent force on the planet, which wiped out everybody and stopped them from leaving, just killed everyone apart from Morbius, his wife and his daughter. And the wife had since died of natural causes. And so the commander decides that he's going to stay there for a while and investigate what's happened, because he feels as if Morbius is somehow hiding something. And that's really the setup of the film. What's great about it, I don't want to ruin it for anybody that's not watched it. I mean, I could have went a little bit more into the plot, but I don't want to leave it at that, because part of what makes this film great is the sense of mystery. And it's a sense of mystery which I think in some places you can only really get in a science fiction film, but it's rarely pulled off. And what makes this film, first of all, so impressive right off the bat is that visually the special effects by A. Arnold Gillespie and others is, the special effects are amazing. They're absolutely astounding for the time. Have they aged now? Well, yeah, they probably have a little bit, but when you watch it, you're still like, you can't believe what they actually achieved in 1956, especially when you think of the really hokey effects that you were still getting. God, you still get now in some films, and you see what they achieved in 1956. You see what's achieved when people get the resources and also put a lot of passion into trying to make a genre film, science fiction, horror, fantasy, whatever it is, when they try to make it as seriously as possible. And in this case, you get just fantastic production values. There are things that have aged in it from a visual aspect, there's no doubt about that. It does very much still feel like it still feels like a 1950s B movie in a lot of ways. It just has that dynamic to it, but it's certainly an A picture in terms of the production value. And the music as well is groundbreaking. It was made by Louise and Bibi Baron. The music was, I think, one of the first times they used entirely synthetic musical score. So they used a lot of, I suppose you would call them electronic instruments and sounds to compose the soundscape of the film. And it gives this really sort of otherworldly feeling when they're on the planet. And also I would like to say that one of the key one of the key aspects to this film, which makes it successful, is the relationship between Leslie Nielsen's commander, and the sort of doctor character on the ship. You might start to go spaceship, commander doctor relationship, where there's this friendship. There's great bits of banter. You might even start going, that sounds eerily familiar. And yeah, the truth is that I think Star Trek is based on this film. I don't think there's much doubt of that. I think especially if you watch the unaired pilot of Star Trek called The Cage, there's no doubt that it was really a television version of Forbidden Planet. Don't let that put you off. First of all, you shouldn't be put off by Star Trek in the first place. It's frankly brilliant, but there's a stigma attached to it, so a lot of people don't watch it because they think that it's all really, really geeky, but it's not. There's a lot of great stuff out there in the Star Trek universe, but certainly don't let Forbidden Planet put you off when I say that it's had a huge influence on Star Trek. It's had a huge influence on science fiction in general, and what's interesting about it is you didn't really get another film of that quality. You've got Forbidden Planet. Now, you may have to go all the way back to Metropolis before you have a film with the same sort of production values. Forbidden Planet, then you've got 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then you've got Alien. You could maybe say Star Wars as well. So, there's this huge gap of time in terms of cinema, and there aren't many films which are made and taken this seriously with this sort of production value. So it's worth watching for that. So where does the horror come into it? Well, the horror comes into it in that there is something on the planet. Not only is there something on the planet, there's something stalking the planet, wandering around, and you see its footprints. It's implied, its presence is implied for most of the film, and there are these really creepy moments and scenes in the film where you have the ship which is landed away from the settlement. It's staying there out in this sort of desert landscape, which has this sort of lonely, creepy feel to it as well. And then you have these strange electronic noises for the soundscape, and then you start to hear something getting closer and nearby, and people start getting killed, and you're wondering what it is. And the fact is that often when you get an explanation of what the creature is, sometimes the revealing of the mystery sort of undoes the first 2/3 of the film. You kind of go, oh, if only they get the end right. Forbidden Planet, not so. Spot on. The conclusion to it, the reveal, they do reveal what the creature is, and I have to say, no disappointment it's had. It's a great idea. It's fantastic. And that's really, I don't have much more to say about it. Well, I do actually, could go on for hours about it, but I don't want to make these videos too long. I might make, I've kind of flirted with the idea of doing like a full, proper, like hour and a half documentary on Forbidden Planet, but there are problems with using footage and things like that. But it's a film which I absolutely adore. I think it's right up there with any science fiction film. I put Forbidden Planet up there with Alien, with Blade Runner, with 2001: A Space Odyssey. I put it up there with all of these films, and I think it absolutely deserves to be there. I think perhaps if we hadn't had this film, we may not have had those other great movies. And I see the spectre of Forbidden Planet in those films that I mentioned. I see them in places. Even in Alien, I absolutely see it. I see a connection there. Whether it was intended or not, I think Forbidden Planet affected the way that people viewed science fiction films and how they should be made. And like I say, while it is primarily science fiction, it's definitely got horror elements to it as well, which is why I've put it here. When I watched it as a kid, the scenes out there in the desert with that thing wandering around were really creepy to me. They were really creepy, really effective. And you could make the argument that it's a monster film. And a lot of the films in the 1950s that were monster films were normally science fiction movies. So there is this line where you say, well, if it's a monster film, surely it's horror, but it's kind of with a science fiction element to it. So science fiction horror, you could say that perhaps it's one of the first sci-fi horrors that was ever made. absolutely highly recommended, and it is also the first the first introduction of Robbie the robot, who was this robot character that was used in a bunch of films, also and kind of Lost in Space as well, the TV series. So there is stuff in it that's hokey 1950s B movie stuff. There's no doubt that there's that element there, but to me that's charming, and the rest of the film is utterly impressive. The effects, the atmosphere, the storytelling, the acting, everything is absolutely incredible about it. And another one of my favourite films from the 1950s was It, the Terror from Beyond Space, which shows you how a really, really low budget version of Forbidden Planet might have been. Forbidden Planet is a much, much better film. So I think you can appreciate what happens when you take a B movie and you really treat it like an A picture, because that's when we get stuff like Forbidden Planet and Alien, which was meant to be like a low budget Roger Corman flick originally. When you treat it like an A movie, you treat it seriously, you get some truly amazing cinematic moments. So that is Forbidden Planet. Go and check that out. If you haven't seen it, oh, I can't wait to hear what you think about it, because it's just a wonderful, wonderful film. So that's all for now. I'll be back shortly with the 18th film in my 31 Horrors of Mike. Bye for now.